unsuspecting parents would be ambushed by a cult of teens who not only believed they were vampires, but were willing to kill. The cult was there to initiate their daughter, but was she aware of the murder about to take place? Should she have been sentenced or deemed a victim herself? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and today's case is going to be quite a crazy one involving a cult of actual teenagers who in fact believed that they were vampires. But unfortunately, this was not something just done for fun. This was something that would turn deadly. I also want to thank our sponsor, Pinecone. Now, Pinecone is the perfect place to earn a little extra spending money or get new products by simply filling out simple surveys on your phone. So you basically get paid for your opinion, and this includes testing and reviewing different products as well. So if you have time between your normal daily tasks, it's the perfect way to bring in a little bit more money for yourself or your family, and it's all within the comfort of your own home. Now, Pinecone is invite only, so if you would like to try it out ASAP with my exclusive link down in the description box below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 1996 in Florida, and the sweet couple, 49-year-old Richard James Wendorf and 54-year-old Noma Ruth Queen, lived in Eustis on Green Tree Lane. Now, they had 4 daughters who were Paula Queen, Sandra Queen, who were from a previous marriage, and then 17-year-old Jennifer and 15-year-old Heather. They also had 3 grandchildren at this point. Now, Richard was a purchasing agent for the Crown Court and Seal Company, and he was known as Rick to people who loved him, and he was said to be an excellent worker, a very smart businessman. He was honest, but he was very firm as well. He also had a twin brother named Bill, and Richard was said to be very thrifty. He was a saver, and he had even started putting back the money that he was actually using to buy cigarettes to then invest in himself. So he decided to quit smoking, and all of the money was going into this fund where he eventually purchased Disney stock. He also loved playing golf with his father, who he was very close to as well. Now, Ruth was able to be a stay-at-home mom, and she loved gardening, quilting, crossword puzzles, painting landscape pictures, and tending to the chicken on a little plot of land that they had. Now, their daughter said that they actually also had a rooster named Floyd. Now, they were said to be raising their 2 youngest daughters, Jennifer and Heather, with quite a light hand. People said that these girls had those 2 wrapped around their fingers, and they were super involved parents. They were always supporting their children. They were always going to the football games for Jennifer because she was cheering at them, and the love within this family was felt in abundance, which made the truth about this murder even harder to hear. They would both be found brutally murdered inside of their home. Around 9:30 p.m. on November 25th, Richard was asleep on the couch and Ruth was at the back of the house taking a shower. It was then that investigators believed that someone had gone in through an unlocked door and repeatedly bludgeoned Richard with a crowbar. His skull and ribs appeared to be fractured. Then the intruders went after Ruth, who had come out of the shower and fought back, ran to the kitchen, and then was killed there as well. Her head had also been bludgeoned, and they were both beaten to death. Their 17-year-old daughter, Jennifer, would come home and find them an hour later. Now, the audio recording of the 911 call couldn't be located. However, we do have a transcript. Jennifer would call 911 and immediately tell the operator that her mother and father had just been killed. She said she just walked in the door and didn't know what happened, that they were dead. When the operator asked if they were breathing at all, Jennifer said she didn't know. She didn't check. She couldn't get that close because they were her parents. She was asked why she thought they had been killed, and she said that there was blood everywhere. She then explained that her sister was gone. She didn't know where Heather was. Jennifer said, "I walked in the front door and I didn't really pay attention, but I thought my dad was sleeping. Then I went and I called my boyfriend to tell him I was home. Then I came back in and I saw blood. Then I ran to the kitchen. My mom was in there. Then I ran to the couch and my dad was there. There was blood everywhere." A while later, Jennifer whispered into the phone, "Can I go check to see if my parents are even alive?" She was asked by the operator if she felt comfortable doing that, and she said she didn't know.
She was worried for them, but didn't know how long it was going to be until help got there. She said, "I've seen these things on TV, and I know these things can happen, but I can't believe." And then she was asking when they were going to get there. Only a few minutes later, they would arrive at the residence.
It was then found that Richard also had the letter V burned into him, which was quite strange, and nobody really knew what this was quite yet. But their 15-year-old daughter, Heather, was missing, and so was their blue 1993 Ford Explorer. Now, Richard's father, so Heather's grandfather, believed that Heather could have actually been abducted, and so a bolo was put out for the vehicle as well as Heather. And at this time, all of Richard's co-workers were taking his murder very hard, and it's unimaginable how Jennifer felt finding her parents that day. For 4 days, it was unknown who had done this and why. However, one call from a 16-year-old would change everything. You see, at this time, investigators couldn't have known that there was more than one killer. In fact, there was an entire cult made up of teenagers who weren't afraid to kill. You see, it all began in Murray, Kentucky, where a 16-year-old boy believed that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. He had begun playing a role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade, and from there he was determined that he was going to live his life as an actual vampire, and that he was one. That is when he came across a senior vampire who was named Jaden Stephen Murphy, who would then have a crossing over ceremony with this boy to become a full vampire. This happened in the cemetery where they would cut themselves and exchange blood. This boy would also join a group called the Vamps, or Victorian Age Masquerade Performance Society, and had a shrine to the occult in his bedroom where he would do satanic rituals, including allegedly carving an upside-down cross into his chest. Now, none of this means that the person doing so is necessarily evil or that they were going to turn into a killer. However, the role-playing would turn into a real-life murder only a year after this. He wasn't alone though, you see, because this boy had created a cult, which he called the Vampire Clan, who all believed that they were vampires and he was the leader. Now, this involved 16-year-old Howard Scott Anderson, 16-year-old Charity Lynn Kesey's, who was actually known to be this boy's girlfriend, and then an 18-year-old named Dana Cooper. They would all go to a location called the Vampire Hotel where they would have these rituals. It was said to be an abandoned home in the woods, and they would allegedly torture each other for sexual gratification. The leader, though, was a 16-year-old named Rod Ferrell, who had quite a history as well as a family, but we will get into that a little bit later, because all of them would drive from Kentucky to Florida with a plan. This was a plan to kill Rod's friends' parents. You see, Richard and Noma, they had this daughter named Heather, and Heather had known Rod when Rod lived in Florida and actually went to school with him, was friends with him, and she had actually been made into a vampire by Rod when he lived there through a ritual of their own, and they kept in contact when he moved. She had recently been asking this vampire clan to come and take her out of hell, that she wanted to run away from home, and Rod was led to believe that she was being harmed by her father. Now, she went by Zoe Hawks on MySpace, where she would talk about anarchy, vampires, cults, and civil disobedience. When they arrived at Heather's family home, Rod and Howard, the two men in this cult, would enter the residence. Rod would actually knock her father, Richard, unconscious before killing him, and then her mother, Ruth, would find Rod and Howard inside of her home and try to fight back, including throwing a hot pot of coffee on them, but she was then killed as well, and a V was burned into Richard because this was Rod's symbol. It was actually a V for vampire and then a dot nearby it, which was for each person in the cult. Now, Dana and Charity, the two girls in the cult, weren't actually with them at this time. After this, they all left town, taking the daughter of the murdered parents with them, as she allegedly wanted. So the 6 of them fled to New Orleans, or at least that's where they were headed. They wouldn't make it there though, because 16-year-old Charity would end up calling her family. Now, there were different sources saying she called her mother, she called her grandmother, that maybe both of them were involved, but she ended up calling, either asking for help or asking for money, and basically admitted to what they had done. Now, they ended up getting the police involved, tricking them into going to this certain hotel, and then the police were actually waiting for them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they were arrested when they arrived. Now, of course, since Charity's family was the reason for them being caught, they were kind of asked about Charity and about why she would be involved in something like this. And they were saying that she was a good child until this. And her father had actually told her to get out of this group, but she said that they wouldn't let her and that they would kill her. He said he believed that the devil had his daughter's soul because he couldn't explain her behavior any other way. All of the members of the vampire clan, as well as Heather, who they didn't know whether she was actually involved in this clan or cult or not, were all arrested. They were all held for a week in the Baton Rouge jail, where they were waiting to be extradited back to Florida, where the murders occurred. Now, Heather was interrogated at this time because they really wanted to know how much involvement she really had. And she was saying that she got along well with her parents. She claimed that she didn't know her parents were going to be killed. She only wanted to run away from home. She said she was then too afraid to try to escape from the clan once she realized what they had done. Now, it was found that Heather had actually lived with her aunt for a while. She was living there until she was kicked out because she started sneaking out. She was inviting her boyfriend over at night, and she was also dressing very differently at this time, which is not why she was kicked out from her aunt's house. Just in general, she started dressing differently. She wore black outfits. She was dyeing her hair every color of the rainbow, and she had a Barbie doll with a noose hanging from her backpack. But even though this was very different and different for what Heather normally did, she said that her mother was very supportive of her change, and she liked the fact that Heather was being her own person. She said that her father didn't really mind and thought it was funny and cute and just some sort of phase she was going through. She said they didn't object to anything she wore, or really anything she did. In a diary in her room found by investigators, she spoke of not being able to sleep without her teddy that she called Squishy, but they also found drawings of demons in her room and a letter where she talked about her taste for blood. But a grand jury ended up letting her go free. They claimed that she acted inappropriately in planning to run away from home and staying with the cult after the murder of her parents. However, she was not involved in the murder, or that is what they believed. However, it had come out that her sister Jennifer claimed that a few days prior to the murder, Heather had come to her and asked her if she had ever planned to kill their parents. She told her that she decided that Rod would be the person that someone would ask if they wanted someone to be killed. Jennifer also said that their mother had been getting worried about Heather because during this time she started really getting in her face during arguments, and that she just was not acting like herself. And so their mother was actually planning to hold a family meeting just to check in on her the very day they were murdered. But even with all of this, Heather was free to go. And on February 12th of 1998, a now 17-year-old Rod Ferrell would go to trial first. While entering the courtroom, he stuck his tongue out at reporters and kissed the glass, yelling, "God bless America." He was being charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery, and armed burglary, and he had originally claimed in his interrogation that a rival vampire cult leader sent associates to Florida to set them up. However, he eventually did begin to talk a little bit more, and we do have the footage available online. I don't know how much I'll be able to put in, but I will tell you a little bit about it. So during his interrogation shown to the court, Rod was calmly smoking a cigarette. He was asked if he knew how to read and write, and he said he's lived more knowledge than school's ever thought of, and he said that is the reason why he did this bull. He was then asked if he had ever seen a psychiatrist, and he said yeah, but he didn't know what for, and that basically the whole town, his parents, the school, whatever, wanted him to go to a psychiatrist, and he would later say that he was mentally disturbed. But he said that that day, Dana and Charity weren't at the home because they were going to see boyfriends, and that he and Howard would walk into Heather's house. They then rummaged through the home trying to get something to drink, and he said that Howard was following him around like a little lost puppy. He then said, "I went to her dad and smacked the F out of him, and he finally quit breathing. So yes, I'm admitting to murder." He said that Richard took 20 minutes to stop breathing, and during that time he thought he was immortal.
Boom! Right across the temple of the head. So I just beat him until he died.
He said that Ruth, or Noma, began to ask them what they were doing when she found them there, and she believed that they were just robbing them, and so he said that they were actually going to let her live, but she then lunged at them and threw the coffee on them, and that made Rod mad, and so he ended up killing her. He said that Howard froze and had never seen anybody murdered before. He said afterwards, when Heather realized what they had done to her parents, she freaked out for about 100 miles or so. And Rod said during their trip, they were actually pulled over 5 times for different things, but they were never caught for the murders. He was saying that he doesn't actually kill anything little and that 16 and up is fine. But he was asked why he would say that Howard had never seen a murder, kind of implying that he had. And he had said that he had seen murders his whole life, starting at the age of 5. That his grandfather was part of an organization called the Black Mask, where they sexually assaulted him and where they had to sacrifice someone in front of him. But during court, it was revealed by Rod that he had asked Heather if it was okay to kill her parents that day, and that she had spoke about it often to him, so he just wanted to make sure, and Rod said that she said yes that day that they were there.
I asked her, I said, since you've spoken so much about killing your parents over the past year, I was like, do you still want me to?
And what did she say?
She said, yeah.
Several of Heather's friends from high school testified that Heather did talk about wanting her parents dead. She described herself as a former demon, and that a lot of people said she was very nice, but deep down they could tell she had some heavy problems. And her ex-boyfriend said that she had told him that the best sex was only after drinking blood. And Heather did not have to testify during this. But a girl named Audrey testified that she had gone to school with Rod years before and that they were friends, and that he had kind of told her about the vampire life, about the vampire clan he had, and she claimed that she had seen Rod the night before the murders. He had showed up unexpectedly at her door, and the entire cult was there, and she was introduced to all of them. She said that Rod called one of the girls his wife, and that she had a baby of his inside of her, and that Howard was his son. He was inviting her to go with them. She didn't really know where, but she declined. And then she said that he had said, "We're going to have some fun tonight," and that they were back in Florida on unfinished business. This was a teenager testifying. That is one of the craziest things about this case, is that everyone involved was quite young, except for, of course, the victims. But another witness named Shannon testified, who was also a teenager, who claimed to have been Rod's best friend. And she had also seen Rob before the murders with the cult, and she said that he used her phone to call Heather to get directions to her house that night, and Rod, had even told her that he was going to kill the Wendorfs because he wanted to steal their car. He then was in their kitchen and saw like a gap in her cabinets and said that he wished that the Wendorfs had the same setup in their kitchen so he could use it to break their necks. That night he was saying that his favorite way to kill was decapitation, and Shannon said that she was then disgusted when she saw Dana drinking blood from Rod's arm that he had just cut. But Rod did end up pleading guilty to the murders, saying that no other members of the cult were involved. They were all innocent, and Howard was just an accessory. But his defense was claiming that Rod was insane, that he had schizotypical personality disorder and Asperger's syndrome, as well as witnessing spiritual things. And investigators had found that Rod Ferrell actually had been under investigation for forcing his way into an animal shelter and brutally attacking dozens of dogs. He allegedly killed 2, and another one was hurt so bad it had to be euthanized, and I will not go into it further, but it was said to be horrific. For Friends of Rob who were not in this cult said that Rob, in the weeks before the murder, was obsessed with killing people to consume their souls. And he said that if he did so, he would obtain superpowers. But his childhood, like I told you before, was quite traumatic. It was explained that Rod grew up Christian, but that his grandfather was not a great man. There is not any proof of this per se, but it's said that he was sexually assaulted by his grandfather and his friends, and that when he told his mother about what happened, she had actually taken him to the home where it happened to and was going to stand up for him, but this traumatized him further being there. And in his teens, he's kind of started rebelling his religion, his family.
He despised his family, he despised his life, he despised life, period. He felt he was trapped on this earth. This is his hell.
And that's really all that's known about Rod and kind of what he was getting up to until the point of becoming a vampire. But his mother was actually found to have written a letter soliciting a 14-year-old friend of Rod's for sex for a vampire initiation. She also believed that she was a vampire, and she had written, "I longed to be near you, to become a vampire, a part of the family immortal. You will then come from me and cross me over, and I will be your bride for eternity, and you could be my sire." She was 35. He was 14. I don't believe that anything actually happened, but for this she was later given 5 years probation for solicitation, and Rod, during his trial, would be sentenced to death.
Now I'm just Satan himself, so not that I really care. I had decided to take the darker path, the evil path. I found that more exciting. If it wouldn't have been the Wendorfs, at the rate I was going, it would have been somebody, if not more people.
His accomplice, Howard Anderson, believed that he was the master of black magic and voodoo, and he seemed to just kind of be out of touch with reality as Rod was, and he was sentenced to life in prison for being an accessory to the charges against Rod. It's unknown if the 5 arrested were the only in this cult or vampire clan. Investigators believe that there could have been up to 30 people, however, they weren't involved in this murder. Who were caught claimed that they knew about this plan to murder the couple. And it was also speculated that the real leader was actually the oldest of the group, who was Dana Lynn Cooper. I'm not sure why, other than the fact that she was the oldest. She was described as normally being the quiet girl who sat in the corner, but she was sentenced to 17.5 years for her part. And then the other girl, Charity Kesey's, the girl who had gotten everyone caught by calling her family, was sentenced to 10.5 years. In a very strange discovery though, while Charity was in prison, she was found by prison guards to be in her jail cell with her cellmate, drinking each other's blood. They described it as her lapping it off the girl's arm. But after everybody was sentenced, Rod would later say that pleading guilty was actually a mistake due to being misled by his defense.
This time he wants to withdraw his plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty to the following charges. He wishes to enter this plea as set forth because he is guilty of the charges, and he has no other reason. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But for 2 years, he was the youngest inmate on death row in Florida. That was until his sentence was reduced by the Florida Supreme Court to life in prison. They claimed that at 16, he was too young to receive a death sentence. And Heather, she continues to claim that she knew nothing about the murders, and she has allegedly gone on to school to become an art student. But it was found that after Heather was released, she continued to have behavioral problems. She was staying with her grandmother, and they had a very intense argument where she could not stop screaming. She would not until her grandmother fired a gun into the air, and then she quieted down, and then she was actually taken to a mental hospital where she was given antidepressants, and she claimed that she had had a breakdown. When she was discharged, her grandmother actually refused to talk to her, and so she ended up staying at the home of an attorney. But she is now said to be married and living in a different state. She has never spent any time in prison. Now, Charity was released in 2006 after 8 years, and she has been said to start a family as well. She has 2 children, and she also volunteers to help criminals who have been released to reintegrate into society. She is also allegedly studying to become a paralegal as well. Now, Dana was released in 2011 after 13 years, and not much is known about her whereabouts or what she's up to. But in 2013, Rod and Howard were appealing to get a completely new hearing. This was denied until 2018, when Howard was resentenced to 40 years instead of life. He is eligible for release in 2031, and the Wendorf family said that they really didn't care about this, that they were more worried about Rod, who is also going to be having a resentencing hearing the next year. This was pushed all the way until 2020, where mental health experts were testifying that Rod had changed, so had his mother, and his mother was actually saying that she was not the same woman, that she was very upset about how they had originally spoken about her in court, but she knows that it's their job to help Rod, so she allowed them to.
I think you're a disturbed young man. I think your family failed you.
That is his opinion. Everybody has the right to say whatever they think. But I did seek help for Rod.
Rod, while in jail, has been said to have a lot of female visitors and even married one of them. He has been said to be taking classes, he has taught classes, and he also has a wastewater treatment license in order to get a job. Now, at this resentencing hearing, Rod appeared to tear up as he apologized to the family. He said,
"You members of the Wendorf and Queen families, I know that no matter what I say or anything that I could ever do, it cannot bring your family members back or erase the pain which I have caused you. Having had years to reflect and better understand the full depths and ramifications of what I did has allowed me to actually see just how terribly that I've wronged you."
But Noma Ruth and Richard's daughters were not wanting to hear what he had to say. In fact, Jennifer said, "Life was perfect before the murders. I had a scholarship to FSU, great friends, I was co-captain of the cheerleaders, I had been promoted at my part-time job at Publix, I was able to save money and even pay some of my bills. My life was so full, I had love, I had it all. Until I had nothing." Jennifer has said that she is now haunted by morbid thoughts, including seeing her mother's brains scattered all over the kitchen and her father without his face. She said that after all this happened, she lived with her father's twin brother and that he cried every single night. She then asked the court not to let Rod go free.
"Maybe it's best that my brother will never know that he died for Rod's thrill. Judge, please keep this man in jail forever, so no one else will ever be a victim."
His sentence of life without parole was then upheld. The judge then deemed him irreparably corrupt. But he was then interviewed while in prison for The Mind of a Murderer, and I will play that for you now.
"My thoughts and feelings at the time of the incident, in fact for that entire time period during the course of that year, were perhaps more so elevated than your average individual, to the point that it's incomprehensible to someone that could not have been there themselves. What it is to be a vampire equates to the life, it equates to power, it equates to the very foundation of existence. That is what blood is to a sanguinary vampire. Many people have associated me with Satanism, and I have to say that although I hold nothing against the satanic beliefs or the people that practice them, I have personally never been involved in such activities or beliefs. Vampirism is not Satanism. They are two separate things.
I'm speaking about the things people said that happened to you, were done to you when you were very small.
By the Black Mass, which is a dark occultic group.
Even from your own grandfather.
I would rather not go into that, Doctor. There are many adults, far more than most people would expect out in your society, that do prey upon young individuals, and they rape them, they murder them, or in their case sacrifice, and any other number of uncouth, callous, and preferably unmentioned things. Vampirism plays its part in my life as it ever has.
But the Wendorf family, or I shouldn't say the whole family, Jennifer, does not believe that Heather actually had any knowledge or involvement in the murders, though some of the family as well as the public disagrees and believes that Heather actually knew about it and was okay with it. What do you believe? Do you think that Rod really felt this remorse at his resentencing, or was this just a ploy to help him get out of prison earlier? Do you think that Heather should have been sentenced for any amount of time for causing this cult to be there in the first place? Or do you think that she really was just a victim who was trying to get out of her family home and that it led to this tragedy? For me, I think that there's this huge disconnect between what Heather was saying online and to her friends and what she told investigators, and a lot of the times it can be that behind closed doors families are horrible. But even Heather herself was admitting that this family was great, that her parents were wonderful, that her mother could be a bit strict, but that was about it. And then online she was saying the complete opposite, that it was hell, that she was being abused. And Rod had said that that is the reason why he ended up coming for her and murdering them, because he thought that she was in danger. So that's just what concerns me. Was this something that she actually had planned for, or just something that she said in passing multiple times? Let me know what you think. This one just boggles my mind, the fact that they all seriously believe that they were vampires. And don't forget to check out Pinecone with my exclusive link down below. Don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.